It is my pleasure to introduce you to Tom Schlesinger, the Executive Director of the Climate Alliance for the Common Good, a LaCrosse-based nonprofit organization that works with small businesses, churches, and other nonprofit organizations to raise awareness about climate change and offer concrete solutions that everyone can make. This topic about climate change is a topic that we discuss frequently at the UU. We talk about it during social justice, green sanctuary meetings, during our religious education, and on Sundays, all with good reason. Today, we have a fresh perspective regarding the urgency to take action now. Normally, we have a congregational response at the end of the talk, but this time, the two-way discussion will be introduced as we go. Tom is going to ask us pointed questions, awaiting our lively response. And so here we go again, talking about what is important. As the old saying goes, when you preach to the choir stands a little taller and sings a little louder. And so with that, Tom, welcome.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tom Schlesinger, as David just kindly introduced me. I've been in lacrosse about 20 years. I have a Ph.D. in political science, specializing in healthcare policy. Was at Gundersen for 20 years, working in a variety of areas, but sort of administration. Retired, and then after only a little bit at home, joined some like-minded people who thought maybe get busy and do what we could about climate change. So we wanted to brainstorm, what could we in a small community do to make a difference? But one of the things to keep in mind is we are not just a small community. There are thousands and thousands of people throughout the US and the world also tackling climate change. So we here don't have to solve worldwide climate change. If we can do what we can for the Cooley area, that will go a long ways. So I do a lot of presentations around lacrosse, often to individuals, often to groups and clubs and congregations as well. But I changed up what I normally do because I understand this is a little more educated crowd, more aware of what's happening with climate change. So I'm not going to do the standard talk. I am going to take advantage of this opportunity to do some brainstorming with you on some topics as well. But first, a few facts about climate change that you may not be as aware of. So climate change, very unfortunately, has become a politicized issue, which it never should have happened. But if you think about it as we all try and preserve that which we value. That which we value is at threat. Is threatened right now, and it's up to us to be aware of what that threat is and what we can do, both as individuals, families, and congregations, to respond to that threat. It strikes a particularly rich chord if you think of it in terms of, we are stewards of this earth, right? It is not our world to despoil and to try and make ourselves rich at. It's our task to preserve it for future generations. Oh, the on button, maybe it's on. Okay. Ooh, what is that? See if I can grab this bar. So just a quick sort of taking the temperature of the group. Here are the 4 options. Read the 4 options, and then I'm going to ask you where you think you fall, just by a show of hands. So are you on number 1? I haven't heard much about climate change, or I don't think it's much of a problem. 2, I think climate change is real and important, but I'm not really doing much. 3, I've taken some steps to change my personal choices, but not much more. Or 4, I actively address climate change through my personal choices and by working for a state and national policy that lowers greenhouse gases. How many 1s? 2s? 3s? 4s? And that's pretty typical. I mean, you have somewhat more threes than I normally see in a group, but I see a lot of twos and threes. Not so many ones anymore, which is a good thing, but not nearly as many fours as we would like to see. So most people, when they hear about climate change, what they perceive in their worlds is the extreme weather that is on the news every night. That's their view of climate change. And it's frightening and it can be overwhelming. I'm flying out to California later today to visit family. There is a huge storm coming down to Southern California that is going to deluge it with risk of mudslides and flooding and coastal flooding, and it's ugly and kind of scary. But you know, for most of us of our generation, you kind of think to yourself, it's not. I think this is happening more often. I think these freak events, these big winter storms, the droughts, that seems like that's happening more often than it has in the past. Well, of course, somebody has studied that. And this is a graph starting in 1980 over there, and every bar represents a year. So you see the bars gradually getting taller. Every different color on the bar is a different kind of extreme weather event: drought, wildfires, floods, winter storms, freezes, severe storms. But what's special about each of those bars? Each bar represents an extreme weather event that had over $1 billion in insurance claims associated with it.
What does CPI stand for?
CPI means the Consumer Price Index. Thank you. And so some people ask very naturally, is this data adjusted for the price increase, inflation that happens every year? Because that would account for a steady rise. And yes, it is adjusted for inflation. Thank you. But what you see here is a gradual rise through the year 2000. And it's like, yeah, it's going up, but you know, it doesn't look too bad. And then you extend it for the rest of the years. So 2023 is here. It's the highest year ever, and considerably taller than last year, considerably taller than the year before. This is, if you look at the on this side with the lines, it's the cost in billions, but this is the number of events by the bars. So there were about 23 events last year. Yeah, Jack.
Was 97 a really good year, or was it just a good year?
I never noticed that. Oh, but it's every other year. Everything is every other year. On the graph, they don't have room to print the years. So yeah. The bar for 97 has nothing? Oh, there. Yeah, you wonder. Maybe the weather forecaster, they had a gap and a vacancy in the position. But this is fact. This is just fact. This is what is going on. And the other thing to keep in mind is this is not the new normal. This is the beginning of a trend that will continue. And what you notice is the steepness of the increase is increasing. Yeah. And so it's buckle up for the ride ahead kind of thing, right? Yeah, you're right. You know, I never looked at that before. You're right. And what happens is as the water gets warmer, the ocean water, that drives more of an increase in hurricanes and such. So as the earth gets warmer, the water heats up. The water heats up less quickly than the earth. But when it does heat up, then you tend to have what would have been a type, class 3 storm or whatever, becomes a 4 or 5. So it's not like these storms would have never happened. they just wouldn't have been as intense or large as we have. But this is my favorite graph in the whole thing. If you want to explain climate change to somebody and why it's important, look at that. So one thing I bet you all know is there is a great deal of scientific consensus on the topic of climate change. 99% of published climate scientists believe that climate change is real, caused by greenhouse gases, and it's almost entirely human caused. What's important about that is normally on any scientific hypothesis or theory, there's still debate on it because, you know, the next study comes out and shows something else. Not on this topic. On this topic, 99% of the scientists agree it's real and it's happening. The only other theory that has that level of consensus in the scientific community is evolution. So this is real. And our predicament is, and you're all aware, that we face a narrowing window in which to act. And unfortunately, things are happening more quickly than climate scientists had predicted, so the window is narrowing more quickly. Now, my question to you is, who knows? You hear this phrase bandied about a lot, or this number, 1.5 degree increase. And you hear that a lot. Anybody know what that represents? Why is it there?
Is that the tipping point?
Yeah.
Things get really bad.
Right, that's the tipping point. Any more detail, anybody, on why is it the tipping point? Something happens at between 1.5 and 2 degrees. This was set back in the 1992 Paris Accords. And what happens is up until, and so they're comparing it to pre-industrial levels of greenhouse gases, about 1900. So how much warming has occurred since 1900? And they say if the Earth warms 1.5 to maybe 2 degrees, that's not good, but we can reverse that pretty easily by just ending greenhouse gas emissions. It's within our control entirely. Once you pass 1.5 to 2 degrees, the Earth natural warming cycles take place within the Earth, where the Earth begins to warm on its own, even if we cut greenhouse gases. And so that's the kind of tough news, and the thing that's why 1.5 to 2 is such a line in the sand. We'll all live past that. It just gets harder to reverse it at that point. It takes more work, and it will last longer. But every 1/10 of a degree that we can prevent is a good thing. So it's not like the Earth is going to end at 2 degrees. So it's that the ocean has been our friend all these years, and so as we emit greenhouse gases, the oceans have absorbed a great deal of that. But as the ocean warms, when it passes 1.5 degrees, guess what happens to all that stored greenhouse gas in the ocean? The oceans will begin to release greenhouse gases at that point. So polar ice caps are white and they reflect the sunlight's heat. When the polar ice caps no longer exist, the Earth is brown and will absorb the heat of the sunlight, and it will speed the warming process. Yeah.
Yeah, those degrees that you're referencing are Celsius?
Yes, that's Celsius. It's 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit. Thanks for the clarification. So what do Americans think about climate change? This is really interesting. This is a study by Yale called The Six Americas. 26% of Americans are actually alarmed about it, and they are doing something about it. They're sort of the fours on that question I asked you before. 27% are concerned. They really believe the Earth is warming. They're just not doing much about it because they either think it's far away in time or it's only going to happen to places far away on this Earth. We know that's not true. We've had droughts, and I had a huge storm that created a tunnel of water down my street 3 years ago on the big storm in 21. And so we know it's here as well. But then there's the cautious, the ones that think, yeah, there's probably something to that, but not sure how much action we should actually take about that. And so they're convincible, they don't know much about it. Disengaged are the people just with their heads in the sand. They're just not paying attention and they're not interested. 11% are doubtful, they think it's probably not happening, and 11% are dismissive, saying it is definitely not happening, it's a conspiracy, right? So the good news really is only 22% are really opposed to the notion of climate change. All these folks over here, this 70, almost 80%, they're very convincible. That's the group we want to move. It's no use working on these people. It's a lost cause. We're better off trying to shift the opinions of these people. Why is this important? Because for years, people have been afraid to talk about climate change with their friends, neighbors, and colleagues because they thought they would be in for ridicule or it would invite too much controversy. That is not true. Almost everyone's worried about it, right? So you can safely go to your neighbor and say, you know, I just started a compost heap in the backyard because that reduces the greenhouse gas emissions. Do you want to see it? I put up solar panels and that saves me money and it's better for the environment. Are you interested in seeing it? Typically what you see when solar panels go up, a couple of houses down, then someone else puts up solar panels, then a couple of houses down, someone else puts up solar panels. It catches on because it becomes sort of the norm. But you have to break the ice. You have to start the conversation.
Tom, can I?
Yeah.
Just want to make a comment. Last week, Tom and I were at this meeting, and it was Lutheran ministers and their bishop talking about this same talk about climate change. And can you back up that one slide? This one was fascinating. To a person, I think they're all here. The ministers, the bishop, yeah, they're here. And we asked them about, what do you hear? And they mostly said here, but sometimes, yeah, here, you know, and everybody's got a story about their uncle and, you know, everybody's got that story. But anyway, thank you. I just want to.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
Yeah.
And so, and I think, you know, this group is probably all right here. But the point is, those that are the firm believers, we have to spread the word. I don't know if I have time. This is just interesting. This is that same graph, but over time. So the number of alarmed from 2015 has gone from 15 to 28, almost doubling, right? The number of concerned has grown from 24 to 29, up 5 points. Cautious has dropped at 11 points. So a lot of the movement have been the cautious moving up to the concerned or the alarmed. Disengaged is unchanged. Doubtful has dropped 4 points. Dismissive is what I would expect. They're just locked onto their position. So opinion is moving in the right direction, although a little bit slowly for what we'd like to see. So the point of that first half was there's good news and bad news. That was the bad news, okay? The stuff I talked about. There's a lot of good news out there as well. And that's something that we need to keep in mind. The really good news is we have the technology we need to pull us back from the brink of climate change. It exists today. We don't have to wait for hydrogen to be developed as a fuel. We don't have to wait for a new kind of nuclear fusion to occur. We don't have to wait for any of that. If we just implement the technology we have, we could stop climate change. What that means is the problem is we lack the social and political will to move forward. There's a huge amount of inertia because our entire economy is based on cheap fossil fuels, and we're trying to shift that. But so this is less about technology, this fight, and more about creating a social movement around climate change, changing the norms of what you can talk about and what should you be talking about, and what becomes normal. Suddenly driving in an EV is not the novel thing in the neighborhood. That's what we want to get. And in China, interestingly, 40% of the new cars on the market are either plug-in hybrids or electric vehicles. 40%, way ahead of us. So they're already there, or they're very close to China, who they always held up as, no matter what we do in the US, China will ruin it for everybody. Not true. China will reach they're projected to reach their peak emissions in 2030 and then go down. That's at least 20 years and maybe 30 years ahead of where we are in the US. And they're responsible for a lot more emissions than we are. So many people are concerned, alarmed, or cautious, but as I talk to people in the community, I just don't see a lot of action. So turn to the person next to you for just a minute and talk about, what are the barriers, do you think, to people taking action on climate change? So this is the last point. This is the last point I want to make, and this is on our website as well. We have a paradigm of 3 separate sets of actions you can take. One is act sustainably, and that's all the stuff we're talking about: composting, driving electric cars, and things like that. Act sustainably. And there's a list of those things you can do to act sustainably. That's important. That is not going to turn, that's not going to cause a tipping point by itself. Share with others, friends, colleagues, coworkers, all that kind of thing. Especially if you're doing something that lowers emissions, share that with others. That multiplies the effect of what you're doing. And then speak up. And that is probably the most powerful lever you have. So that's email, phone call, write your elected officials, attend a common council meeting, join a local climate lobby group, a local climate change group. We're a small group. We have about 8 members. We've been volunteering for 4 or 5 years, but we have made a lot of impact. We have a small business toolkit. We just partnered with the city of LaCrosse to offer a workshop on that. I'm working with the school district on developing a climate action plan. We're active in a lot of different areas, but we have a few areas still with holes. So anyone that's interested in volunteering, but become active on climate change. It's important to do it in your personal life. There's a lot more material on the website. So I urge you to go there. And there are cards here that can point you to the website too. So,
all right.